right, welcome back everyone. In the last module, we went over how different ad types look to a consumer, somebody actually shopping on Amazon. What are we going to be doing here in this module?
Well, now we're going to be talking about those ad types and the targeting types, but from the perspective of someone who's actually trying to launch an Amazon advertising campaign.
All right, so we're actually going to go ahead and screen share for the first time now Seller Central, namely the ad console, so that you can get a little bit of a better idea about on the seller side how some of these targeting types look.
All right, so we've gotten really high level on the different ad types, the different targeting types, the different match types, but how do you actually navigate advertising console? When you first log in, it can be relatively overwhelming. You typically see this whole left-hand section. You have your overview, you have bulk operations, studies, DSP, brand content, creative tools, all of those things. The first place you want to be is just sponsored ads, campaign manager. This is where you're going to do the majority of business when it comes to Amazon advertising. Now, for this specific use case, we're going to jump directly into creating a campaign. But one thing to note, you see this section that says grow sales? Amazon changes the user interface of Ad Console frequently. So if things are a little bit different than what they look like in this video, shoot us a message, but in general, the basics are going to be the same. Before you create your first sponsored product campaign, you're going to need to click create a campaign. Now, you're going to get an overwhelming amount of options now. We have sponsored products, we have sponsored brands, sponsored display, sponsored TV, and we now have sponsored products for other retailers. None of that's going to apply just yet. We're going to focus solely on a sponsored product campaign. And to reiterate, sponsored products typically drive around 60 to 70 to 80% of your advertising sales. They're the ones that show up all within Amazon search. They have the most visibility, and customers click on them because they don't necessarily realize they're an ad. So continuing on to sponsored products, one of the first things you have to do is, well, name your campaign. Within Ad Console, Amazon actually has us name our ad group first. What you're going to find out is we typically recommend, running minimal ad groups. So your campaign name is usually going to be the same as your ad group name, but you can do this however you would like. So we're going to put a test name here. The next thing you're going to do is add your products. So I think the biggest recommendation I can give here is to add similar products. We personally recommend running one ASIN per campaign per ad group, right? We want to advertise one product in every campaign so I know exactly how it's performing. If you
I have a quick question for you. I'm just curious about your strategy going back up to the name. Obviously, we're not taking it too seriously here because it's just a test. But this is actually, in my opinion, kind of important for people because, like you got one product. Okay, it's not you can name it whatever you want. But some of my accounts, I've got like 50 and 60 products, and then each of those has like a whole bunch of campaigns, and you might want to go look at a certain group. So everybody has different strategies. Like me, I kind of like put the name of the product there, something I know I could do. I know some people do the ASIN. What about you? Like, well, what do you do? Like, do you have a set thing that you always do?
You mean you don't memorize every single ASIN number in order to...
I unfortunately do not have a photographic memory. No.
So there's a few general guidelines that we like to 100% follow, and we'll actually put these in a guide in this course as well. But I think the biggest things that matter is we call it a product identifier. Most people do not memorize every single ASIN associated with their products. So we use product identifier of, hey, what is one or two words that we know every single time is going to relate to this specific product? So I would probably do, coffin shelf. And the reason being is Amazon actually has a decent filtering process within Ad Console. So that allows us to quickly identify every campaign that is focused on this product. Now, we do put our own ASIN in there. Some people do not because, again, most people don't memorize ASINs. But when it comes to building your own reporting, sometimes it can be nice having the ASIN in the name as well. And some brands prefer to have their ASIN so they can quickly identify certain products. That's not a standard. It's not necessarily a necessity. We like having it because, again, we use it for other things in the reporting process, but not always required. Other things that we personally like to build in is our targeting. Is it a campaign focused on branded keywords? Is it a campaign focused on non-branded keywords? Is it focused on organic rank? How can I understand what my targeting is within the campaign name? So we personally like to put that. So maybe I'm focused on ranking keywords. The reason I want that built into the campaign name is maybe I'm scrolling through Ad Console and I see a 200% ACOS. Most people are going to panic and pause. If I know the
Mm,
purpose of that campaign is for organic rank because I can see it clearly in the campaign title, I know that I'm going to optimize it a little bit different. Like Bradley, we talked a lot about bid templates within Helium 10 ads and different ways that you can optimize your bids. That is why I want that in the campaign name so I can clearly see, hey, this campaign is for launching. This campaign's for profitability and know, okay, it's being optimized a little bit different than the rest of my campaigns.
makes sense.
Anything else that you put in there?
No, that's kind of it. Like, actually,
Yeah.
you just gave me some ideas on ways I can further, because now, like, for example, I've got multiple coffin shelves, and sometimes it's a little bit hard. Like, one of them I put like large coffin shelf, but
Yes.
having all of those together is good. I kind of did it a little bit like, but pretty much only on my launch campaign. Like I'll have launch in there. Now, obviously, we're going to show how to do it in Helium 10 ads
Yeah.
in a little bit, and it automatically kind of like tells you what product it is, and what kind of, if it's a research campaign, if it's a performance campaign. So yeah, these are all good tips.
Actually, I'm going to call out one of your comments of you have multiple coffin shelves. So the next step that we typically do for large accounts is not only do we have the product identifier, coffin shelf, but we'll have the categorization in there. We put both of those because maybe you want to view your business more holistically and you're curious, how are my coffin shells performing versus my egg holders? From a profitability standpoint, from a campaign perspective, you can break that out. And then because of our naming, we can say, hey, let's drill down a step further. How is my large coffin shelf doing? That's a really good way to have flexibility and just understanding your ad console, but also, again, breaking out your reporting further. Another thing that you may do is, maybe you have 5 campaigns focused on profitability or efficiency. So we're going to have a campaign focused on maybe profitability, and then we want to put our keyword research methodology behind it. So profitability and then Helium 10. That's going to allow us to know that we pulled our keyword research from Helium 10. It's a profitability campaign. You don't have to go that granular, but I think it does help as you start scaling out. Because, like you said, you're going to have a lot of variations, a lot of variables. If you're in supplements, maybe you have protein and you want to know how your protein's doing versus your creatine, but then you want to know how your vanilla is versus your chocolate. That's why it helps to have this all built into the name, because then you can use your portfolios better and your further reporting much better.
Awesome.
Now, kind of going back, again, we try to not put every single product in a campaign. If I have both my coffin shelves and my chicken egg coop holders, I just went straight off the title here. It's going to be difficult because now you're going to be targeting keywords that don't cross over. It's going to be really hard to understand your reporting, your margins. You're going to see your campaign performance, but maybe you have a different ACOS goal. The coffin shelf is $10 more. I'm assuming you have different margins across each product. That can make it relatively difficult to understand if your campaign's performing well. So we try to focus on, grouping products that are very similar. So we're going to stick with the coffin shelf in this use case. Now, scrolling down, we've already talked about our targeting types, but an auto campaign is going to allow Amazon to select the keywords for you. It's going to be a pretty simple process. You're going to select auto campaign. You're going to set a default bid for your targets. If you want to get a little bit more granular, you can set your default bids for the different targeting groups. Close match and loose match are typically going to be really aligned. They're going to be closely matched to the keyword you're looking for. Substitutes and complements sometimes are going to go a little bit broader. It's typically products that you're going to be targeting. So if you want to set your bid based on that alignment, you can. And then you're going to go directly below to the negative keyword targeting group. We've talked a decent amount on negative keyword targeting throughout this process. So I think you're pretty familiar on whether or not you want to put in a negative keyword target then. And then the same thing for a negative product target. If there's certain products you don't want to target, maybe a competitor who's much better positioned than you, then you can exclude them from this. Now, the last section that we're going to get into with that auto campaign, we still got to go back and do our manual campaign, is the campaign bidding strategy. Again, we've talked loosely on the different types of bids. For this use case, because I know that I use Helium 10 ads, I'm going to set fixed bids. I don't want Amazon applying dynamic bidding on top of my software, because then your software is going to try to make bid adjustments and Amazon's going to make bid adjustments, and it's going to be really hard to understand who is doing what. So I typically recommend setting a fixed bid, especially in the early days when you're trying to figure out how bid management works. Now, the next thing you're going to do is bid adjustments. Now, I don't recommend doing this in the beginning of your setup. I like making database decisions. So this is something we can focus on after we launch our campaign. But in general, what it's going to allow you to do is say, hey, I have a base bid of $1. But because I know top of search is really popular and usually has a higher conversion rate, maybe I'm willing to bid more on top of search. This is the place to make that recommendation. Again, I like making database decisions. Let's launch our campaign first. Let's collect some data, and then we can make those bid adjustments further. The last few things we're going to do is come up with that campaign name again. Normally, what I do is I scroll up and I'm going to just copy my ad group name and put it directly into my campaign name. You don't have to run this fashion. If you like running multiple ad groups, then those ad groups can be named in a different way. I recommend running one ad group per campaign. So we're going to set the campaign name. If we have a portfolio, we can put it in a portfolio, but this is just for organization. So don't get overwhelmed by this. Portfolios allow you to group all of your campaigns into a certain fashion for better reporting, pretty much. And then we're going to set a start date. I don't ever really recommend running an end date unless you're running a campaign for a specific purpose, certain seasonality. The beautiful thing about Amazon advertising and Amazon PPC is we only get charged if someone clicks. So even if you're out of season, someone asked about Christmas trees. If they're clicking on a Christmas tree, even in the middle of summer, they probably want one, just maybe not for Christmas, right? Maybe they're doing a family shoot or some type of decor thing, right? So we typically recommend running start dates, no end dates, and then daily budget. Your daily budget is the threshold of whatever you are willing to spend. Now, one thing to note, your daily budgets are not going to be spot on. If you choose $15 a day, Amazon's going to average out that $15 a day across 1 month. So maybe one day you spend $5, maybe the next day you spend $25. It's still going to average out to $15 a day, but don't be concerned if you see higher and lower days. Now, if this was it, we are done with our auto campaign, we would push launch. It's relatively pretty simple. We're going to start collecting data pretty quickly. If you have a low bid, you may not collect data as quickly because you're not going to get the best placement, so you're going to have lower traffic. If you launch with a high bid, then you're going to collect data, within the next few hours typically, and you can start optimizing beyond that. But let's say we go back to our targeting and we're really good at keyword research, so we think we're going to run manual targeting. We've used Cerebro, we know what keywords are best for our product, and we're ready to push manual targeting. This one's fantastic because this means we're going to choose the keywords or products that we want to target. I have my coffin shelf. I know exactly what keywords I want to show up. That is when manual targeting is for me. So you can choose either keyword targeting or product targeting. Keyword targeting, exactly what it sounds like it is. You're going to target keywords that you upload. Product targeting, same thing. I'm going to choose a category. I want to target all of the products within floating shelves, or I want to target individual products. And I can go in personally and say, hey, this is a direct competitor. This is a $92 coffin shelf. What are they doing in this space? This is a perfect person to target. Let's say, hey, I've identified these two products. They're much more expensive than mine. I want my ad to show up on their listing because my product is going to look so much better because it's so much cheaper. So I'm going to throw that product right here. My ad could show up underneath that product's product detail page. That is what product targeting is. But again, let's say I want to go a little bit broader into category targeting and targeting everyone searching for floating shelves. I could add that right here and target all of floating shelves. I can adjust my bid as normal. That's what product targeting is. But I think a lot of the focus in the beginning needs to be on keyword targeting. So we're going to go back to keyword targeting. There's going to be a few different options here. One, I always unselect this, and this is going to be one of those nuances that could change in ad console depending on when you watch this video. But at its premise, what Amazon's trying to do is say, hey, we're going to look at all the keywords you uploaded and then also target more keywords. I don't love that. If I wanted to do that, I would have ran an auto campaign. So I'm going to unselect that feature. Now, I'm going to be able to look at keyword groups, which is keywords related to gifts, keywords from brands also considered by shoppers in my category, keywords related to my product category, or keywords related to your brand. I'm not going to run those right now. As you can see, it's an early beta. Again, it's very similar to an auto campaign. It's more audience-based targeting. What I want to do is focus on these keywords that I already have from a keyword research standpoint. Coffin shelf, that's exactly what I want. Black shelf, exactly what I want. Do I want to do floating shelves? Not quite. If someone types in floating shelf, they're probably looking for something a little bit more aligned with their decor and not something a little bit more Halloween-esque as a coffin shelf, right? So I've identified these keywords. I think they're best for me. The next big thing is to decide what match type do I want to run them in. So again, we've already talked about match types. If I'm running it in broad, I'm going to be able to target a much larger audience. If I'm running it in exact, I'm going to be much more precise, and that's exactly what I'm going to show up for, which is what I want to do right now. So I'm going to upload exact match, coffin shelf, exact match, black shelf. That's really it. Now, let's say I have a few other keywords from like Cerebro that I wanted to use. Then we're going to go to the enter list and do the exact same thing. I'm going to select exact match, and I'm going to type in, let's see, Halloween shelf, Halloween decor. Exact match. I can see some recommendations. If I wanted to add them, I could. I'm going to say I want a custom bid. I want to bid a little bit lower. Suggested's a little bit too high for me. So I'm going to set a 20-cent bid. I'm going to add those keywords, and there we go. I have 4 keywords in my campaign ready to go. They're all exact match. So my ad's only going to show up for Halloween shelf, Halloween decor, black shelf, or coffin shelf.
And we only, I see you only picked exact.
Yep.
You only pick exact match there, and like that's kind of like my strategy. I know there's some people out there who will just have all 3 kind of like match types in one campaign.
Yep.
But the way Helium 10 ads does, and the way I manually do it when I start my own campaigns, is I like to segregate like the match type, because otherwise when you're trying to optimize bids and see what's working and not working, it's kind of hard, in my opinion, to have all 3 match types in one campaign or ad group.
Absolutely. And I've seen mixed opinions on this, and I'm honestly, I don't lean on one side or the other. When you're only focused on profitability and maybe you're not as good with bid management, or maybe you have an incredible software, it's easy to break them out. So we always recommend breaking them out in that use case. Exact match is typically the higher conversion rate because you're bidding on exactly what keyword you uploaded. I know if someone's searching for coffin shelf, that's my product. On the flip side, if I went to broad match, then I could be bidding on black shelf for office. That's not going to be very aligned. Now, it's going to cast a much wider net. So we do see that broad match typically drives more sales, but our conversion rate's usually a little bit lower because, again, if someone's typing in black shelf, maybe they want a coffin shelf, or maybe they want just a really sleek black shelf for their office, right? So when you break out your campaigns by your match type, your exact match has a chance to be a lot more profitable because it's very precise, very exact. It's easy to optimize your bid based on the data. On the flip side, if you run a broad match campaign, it can be a little bit more difficult to optimize because now you're going to have to figure out what search terms drove a sale from that keyword, right? We know there's a difference in a keyword and a search term. The keyword may have been black shelf. The actual search term may have been black shelf for office. That's probably not going to perform as well. So in general, when you segment them, it allows for a lot better optimization controls. But if you do have good bid management software, sometimes you can get away with running all 3 match types because, Helium 10 ads, the majority of automations are going to at least take into account that scenario. Now, again, negative keyword targeting. I like to make data-based decisions, so I don't have any data showcasing why I need to have a negative keyword just yet. Bradley and I have talked about this prior, and we've used the example. If you sell iPhone cases, this is a good spot to negate Android cases or models that are not within your sizing, right? Because not only is it going to be hard to convert that customer, but if that customer does buy your product, they're going to return it. So it's going to hurt you in other areas of the business. If you have one of those use cases, this is when we use negative keyword targeting. Scrolling back down, campaign bidding strategy, exact same philosophy. I like using fixed bids if I'm relying on any software because it's going to be most consistent for me. If I do want to be more aggressive, I can do dynamic bids up and down. That's going to allow Amazon to increase my bid. So it's not great if you're profitability focused. Dynamic bids down only can be okay because then Amazon's going to decrease your bids to maybe focus on a little bit more profitability. It's just going to be difficult when you're running a software who's optimizing your bids and allowing Amazon to optimize your bids. Bid adjustments, we've talked through. Again, let's start with a clean slate and make a database decision. And same thing, campaign name, same as your ad group, budget, start date. We've chatted about all that. Bradley, before I move on to Helium 10 ads, is there anything else that you think we should cover within creating a new sponsored product campaign?
I think some people just might have the question about the budget, and so it's something that sometimes you could have a $100 budget and it'll use it all up within hours. Sometimes you'll
Yep.
have $100 budget and for whatever reason it just uses like 10, $15.
Yep.
So like what? Let's say what compared to somebody's real budget, like say, hey, this is total what I'm trying to
Yep.
spend on ads. When I first initially set the budget, like, do I set it exactly that? Do I go up 50% and just watch it to
Yeah.
see what happens? Like, how can I make sure that what I'm spending is about what I was looking for?
This is a great question. And the reason budgeting is so difficult is people don't typically realize that their budget is dependent on their bids. And what I mean by that is we've walked through a lot of examples of Amazon advertising as real estate, right? So if I create a campaign and I upload a ton of keywords and I set a 10-cent bid, no one's going to be clicking on those ads because no one's going to see those ads. Those ads are going to show up on page 4, 5, and 6. It's so cheap, the location is terrible. If no one clicks on your ad, you're not getting charged. If you're not getting charged, you have zero spins. So even if you have a $20,000 budget, it's not getting clicked on because your ads aren't visible, right? On the flip side, let's say I want to go really crazy and I create a campaign and I upload 2 keywords, but they're $50 bids. A $50 bid is probably going to get you at the top of page 1. And if you're at the top of the page 1 in a competitive category, you're going to get a ton of clicks up front. They're going to cost you a lot, but they're going to spend. So that's how your bid management is directly correlated with your budget, which is why this is a difficult answer. If you're in a really high growth category, I mean, I've worked in some of the most expensive high traffic categories like supplements. In the supplement category, I've truly been able to spend $20,000 on one keyword in one day because that many people click and search for supplements daily. That is insane. On the flip side, I've worked in the most lucrative niche categories ever where there's only a couple hundred people a day searching. And if that's the case, your budget's going to be a lot smaller. So I think the biggest thing that I say again is you can make database decisions. That's the beauty of Amazon ads is you can move quickly. So if it were me, I would set a pretty conservative budget. If I want to spend $1,000 a month, then I'm going to do the math of my daily budget needs to be X. And I'm maybe going to go a little bit lower and I'm going to start my campaign and I'm going to check in frequently. If I check in at noon and I've barely spent any money, then I probably need to increase my bids. If I check in at noon and I'm out of budget, but I'm profitable, I can increase my budget. If I'm out of budget and not profitable, I probably need to decrease my bids. That's kind of the line that we have to walk with Amazon advertising. In order to focus on profitability, we lower our bids. In order to focus on scalability, we increase our bids. And then your budget should be the secondary lever based on your bids and how much you are spending. Does that cover that?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Amazing. So that's pretty much it. If I launch the campaign, we're going to see it directly within Ad Console and we're going to be ready to go. Now, Helium 10 ads is pretty similar, if not a little bit more efficient. And I believe everyone's probably watched the video so far on, or heard Bradley and I at least talk about when to use a software, when to use Ad Console, and so on. There's a few different reasons that software can be really powerful. One, different visualizations and more customization around reporting. That's definitely one of the recommendations. You can see here I'm in Helium 10 ads. We have a lot of different ways that we can view our insights quite a bit better. For this specific reason, we're going to talk about, again, creating a campaign, How do I get a sponsored product campaign launched? Similar fashion, create a campaign. This is where it gets a little bit different. I think we've been able to simplify the process quite a bit. If you know absolutely nothing about ads, you haven't listened to any of our modules, you can quickly create a campaign under the quick startup section. If you know a little bit more about ads and you want a little bit more control, you're going to be able to go into a guided campaign. That's going to give you more opportunities to target some of the sponsored brands, sponsored display, and things like that. And if you know absolutely everything there is to know, you can go to single campaign and you're going to be able to create everything and then adjust any of the existing rules that you already have in place for optimization. For this video, let's just showcase how much quicker a quick campaign is here. I'm going to click on quick. Same thing, I'm going to enter the product group name here. So we've talked about this, how you group your products, your product identifier. The bid strategy, I would say, is where this gets relatively more efficient. So I've talked a lot about lowering bids for profitability, increasing bids for scalability. I make it sound easy. It's not, because you have to do that for every single keyword that you are targeting within every single campaign. Bradley, I've done some of the analysis. For one product, I was able to find like over 500 search terms that were profitable for us.
Wow.
That's
I
having
wish
to
I had
optimize,
products that had 500 profitable search terms.
right? It's insane. But you got to think that's now having a bid optimization formula for every single one of those search terms. It adds up quick. And then if Bradley's case, you have 40 products, different campaigns targeting different things, it adds up. This is why it's so important to have a bid automation, either a software or a solution in place. So that's why it's valuable at Helium 10 Ads has made this quite a bit more simple. You can see with bidding strategy, we can maximize impressions. We've talked about this. How do you maximize impressions? You bid really high. You show up page one. When we're maximizing impressions, that's kind of the core focus. Now, we still have some thresholds in place of, maybe I'm not willing to bid $20. I can set up a min and max bid in this use case, but knowing that the algorithm is going to optimize for max impressions, it's not always going to be profitable. The top of page one is a billboard in Times Square. It's not always going to drive a direct sell. It's about the visibility. Now, the second thing we could look at is a target ACoS. I would say this is probably the range that the majority of brands that I work with fall under. They have an ACoS goal that they want to hit, and it's just math at that point. You take your conversion rate, you take your CPCs, and you figure out how much you need to bid in order to drive profitability. As you can see here, the templated target ACoS is 30%. I would say that's around most people's break-even point, so that's why most people choose to target a 30% ACoS. This being said, what happens when you lower your bid? You may see a drop in sales. So if you're launching a product, target ACoS may not be best for you unless you choose a really high target ACoS, right? Because your goal needs to be focusing on driving orders, more conversion rate, more reviews are left, the better you're going to be positioning yourself. So a lot of flexibility here because you can choose a higher target ACoS, but at the end of the day, the whole goal is going to be hitting that target ACoS. The next thing is maximizing orders. This one's a little bit different than maximizing impressions, and let's talk about that. Maximizing impressions is going to take into account search volume within a category, right? I may be able to drive a lot of orders from vanilla chapstick with gloss, but maybe not a lot of people are searching for that. So I'm not going to get a lot of impressions. That's kind of the difference here. When we're looking at maximizing orders, we're really looking at conversion rate opportunity and sales opportunity versus maximizing impressions. We're looking for search volume and just straight visibility. So those are kind of the three things that we recommend and typically see brands falling within. We also have an opportunity to create a custom rule. This is something that you can play around with on your own. Say you have certain scenarios you want to look for. Maybe you care about click-through rate more than others. Maybe you care about just overall impressions. This is your time to shine. I'm not going to cover that here. Now, again, this campaign builder is quick and easy for a reason. We've selected our target ACoS. We're focusing on profitability. We want to be at 20% because that's going to be a little bit lower than maybe our margins. I'm going to add my products here, slightly different, added to the account. We are going to add a name here. Again, just for funsies, we're going to put test, and I'm going to select next. This is where the ease and efficiency of working with a software comes into play. You can see I have 4 campaigns structured and ready to go. We have our traditional auto campaign, which is great for keyword research and data collection. And then we're going to make assumptions or adjustments based on how well the keywords within that campaign are performing. So we have a manual campaign for research, a manual campaign for performance, and a manual campaign that's going to target products. Everything is set up and ready to go from the get-go. Now, one thing I want to talk about is suggested bids. I see a lot of people asking questions around suggested bids, and even in this case, suggested budgets. Those suggestions are guardrails based on data. A lot of people will be like, the suggested bids were too high. I didn't like that, so I didn't launch the campaign. It is a suggestion based on what we see within the market. So as you can see here, suggested bids are around $1.61. If that's too high for you, launch a 70-cent bid. If it's too low and you want to be more aggressive, launch a higher bid. That's fine, but it's a guardrail for what the market is doing. Budget is the same thing. You can kind of assume the demand within a category based on sales volume, which we can then work backwards to figure out the amount of clicks are in a category and the amount of budget someone needs to really drive traffic in those categories. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. That applies to both Helium 10 ads and Ad Console. And then as you can see, any automations you would like to apply, you can also apply here. Some people like to do search term isolation, right? They want to harvest a keyword from one campaign, bring it to another campaign, and isolate it just in that campaign. That is an opportunity. We can do keyword promotion where it's moving them through the funnel of the process. Maybe it did really well in an auto campaign and we need to move it somewhere else. We can do bid adjustments here. Highly recommend doing some level of bid adjustments. And then negative keyword automation. We've talked about negative keywords and when not to negate a keyword. All of that can be done right here. Bradley, anything to add while I head back and go through some of the other options?
I think this is important because regardless of whether you're using software like Helium 10 ads or you're doing it in the ad console like Destiny was showing, this is the kind of structure that I suggest, like at the very least having these 4 different campaign types, an auto, a broad match, one, or a phrase depending on your whatever floats your boat, and an exact match campaign, and then an ASIN targeting. Like when we were in the ad console, we were just going through kind of like a couple different types, but this is creating it all at the same time. So you saw how many steps it took to do it once. This allows you to do it all together at the same time, and then you're going to have like these campaigns talk to each other in Helium 10 ads. So she mentioned search term isolation, that moving one keyword from one campaign to the other. Even if you're not using Helium 10 ads, that's still what you're going to need to do. You start 4 or 5 campaigns, and then you just got to, the only difference is you just have to manually kind of move keywords back and forth. But by setting it up in this way, from day one, they're going to be talking to each other, the different campaigns, and working with each other. So it just saves a lot of time from having to manually edit it.
Absolutely. When we're working with an ad console, that was 4 different campaigns, as mentioned. That's 4 different names. I need to add my ASINs 4 different times. I need to set my budget 4 different times, my bids 4 different times, and my keywords. That was everything launched within one go. Now, again, it's called Quick, and it's for new sellers because it's your baseline foundation. That's really important to understand because there's going to be nuances. A lot of people will be like, well, I don't want to launch product targeting from the very beginning. That's fine. That's when we're going to move into maybe a single campaign or a guided approach, which is going to allow you to have a little bit more flexibility into what you want to run. But for a new seller, that foundation is quick and it's efficient. And if you're a new seller, I think you probably know it's not just about the results. Operational efficiency matters a ton. Sometimes you can get by without being perfect because you're moving a lot quicker and you're doing something that's a little bit easier, a little bit hands off. Managing ads can be a full-time role.
And we're spending a lot of time, like the next couple of videos in this series are going to be a lot faster, because when you're just getting started, sponsored products is where you're going to be, focused on, and that's going to be, regardless of your level, that's what you got to start with. And the other videos we're going to do in this series, it's a lot faster setup because we're only talking about like one type each. But this is where we want you guys to really focus, kind of like when you're starting a new product, or just learning ads. You've got to start. Never jump to sponsor brand or sponsor display. This is where you guys need to start.
Absolutely. And I would say the playbook's relatively similar. Once you learn the foundation, you can figure out the rest on your own. Sponsor brands, still keyword targeting and product targeting, just with creative added. Sponsored display, still product targeting, just with creative added and a little bit more flexibility around audiences. The foundation matters. And once you get that right, it's a lot easier to dip your toes into the other variations. Now, moving on to the second section within Helium 10 ads, we have guided. Again, we're going to move a lot quicker now. We have the product name. We're going to put test since we've already covered campaign naming. Bid strategy, same thing, max impressions, target ACoS, max orders, 30%. Add our product, scroll on down. We have next. Now, this is where we have a little bit more flexibility with what kind of campaign we're going to set up. I don't really need to go too deep in this. We're going to cover sponsor brands and sponsored display later, but we're going to select sponsor products. We're still going to have our templated opportunities, but now we have a little bit more flexibility around our controls. So advanced naming options, things like that. And we have a little bit more opportunity to add our own keywords. This is again where it gets important. If you think you have a good understanding around your match types, around what type of keywords you want to add, it's the same workflow, but we're still considering 4 other campaigns, right? It's still much quicker. We're looking at 4 campaigns, but I have more flexibility around the keywords that I want to add. Also, I would say the suggestions, as you can see, are very, very aligned. That's important to consider. Next, added them to campaign, good to go there. Next, we can add products if we would like. Not going to do that here. We can, if we wanted to add a category just for showcasing the visibility. Don't want to go health and household. That's a little bit too broad, but maybe I want to go to pain relief. I can add that here. Next, able to see everything that I was working with. This is where, again, we have a little bit more customization. So if you have a good grasp on Amazon ads and you want to come in and play around with things, we can look at, our targets, our negations, everything from one view. This is another important call out. When you're within Ad Console, you typically have to work under multiple tabs. You have your campaign view, you have your search term view, you have your ad group view. It can be a little bit complicated. Helium 10 ads, we have that all in one view. I'm going to pause here. Bradley, before I hypothetically push launch campaigns, do you have any other callouts around this page?
This is just kind of like going back to what she was talking about with the isolation. Me personally, I don't use isolation. So that's when you would fill in that right side there with the create negative targets. But again, this is what we were talking about earlier about your campaigns need to work with each other. Regardless if you're using here in Helium 10 ads, this is the basic structure that I find works best, where you've got these different match types, and then hey, your auto campaign, could find a keyword or a search term that works for you. It could find an ASIN of like a product target that could work for you, and instead of just waiting and hoping, crossing your fingers that Amazon's going to keep showing you for that ASIN or for that search term, which it very well could, but it could just be, parts of the day. I mean, you theoretically want that keyword to be, you advertising for that keyword or that ASIN 24 hours a day potentially. And that's why you need to be on the lookout for these in the auto campaign so that you can put it to that product target campaign, or you can put it to that manual campaign. So again, I want to emphasize this just simplifies the whole process, but this is not just, you only need to be thinking in this kind of structure just because you're using Helium 10 ads. If you're just using Ad Console, I highly recommend having this exact structure as well.
Yep, absolutely. So not pushing launch campaign, again, theoreticals here. We're going to go to Exit Builder, and we're going to do a really quick walkthrough of the last option. Now, it's going to be a really quick walkthrough because this one's probably the most similar to Amazon ads. It gives you a lot of control, a lot of flexibility. That's why it's best for experienced sellers. You're going to be taking the workflow that you would maybe do more similar to Amazon ads. So, single campaign, we can immediately see sponsored product, sponsored brand, sponsored display, auto, or manual all from one view. I think this is a really good way to look at things. If I wanted to click over real quick, you can kind of see, could immediately go into the builder for those ad types. But we're going to do a sponsored product manual campaign. And we're going to follow that same flow: name, portfolio, bids, placements, bid strategy, target ACOS, ad product, budget, bid, add keywords. So it's really similar. I think it's a very nice user experience here. This is where you're going to have full control. So if you know what kind of placements you want to go ahead and add from the beginning, if you have specific rules that you've created, maybe you want to sell through your inventory, so your only goal is maximizing conversion rate and orders, you can create those and apply them to your campaign setup here. And you're going to immediately be able to select those aspects, again, custom rule, and apply them at this stage, which is really, really powerful. Anything else, Bradley?
Nope, that pretty much covers that. It's what you said is pretty much my exact flow of what I do.
We've built the foundation with all the other campaign builders at this point. So again, as you learn the foundation of keyword research, of targeting, the rest is going to get a lot easier because it's all taking the same application and making small tweaks and small adjustments. So I think there you have it for actually creating a hands-on keyboard sponsored product campaign. We're going to dive into some of the other ad types and some of the optimization types, but you should be able to go in right now and do your own campaign after this.
All right, Destiny, thank you for helping us to go over these different ad types. A lot of information to digest there, but this is all great stuff. This is just the beginning, though. Let's dive a little bit deeper now into something more specific in the next module, and that's going to be about what?
Launching your very first sponsored brand campaign.
See you in the next module.